Jane Buckley grew up in Derry, Londonderry, Northern Ireland during the Troubles, a deeply rooted conflict that took place from the late 1960s until the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. Her Stone's Corner series, Turmoil, Darkness, Light and Hope, cut straight to the heart of one of Northern Ireland's darkest chapters. These are character-driven stories with bite, brutally honest, deeply human, the kind of books that stay with you long after the last page. There's no gloss, no filter, just truth told with grit, empathy, and a sharp eye for the everyday details that shape people's lives. Jane's stories are rooted in actual events, voiced in plain language, and built around ordinary men and women trying to survive the extraordinary. She writes to make sense of it all, to honor those who lived through it, to make sure it's not forgotten. Jane, you are very welcome.
Oh wow, what an introduction. It's amazing to hear that sort of comments. It's surreal, but thank you so much, Sharon, for having me.
Jane, as we were talking briefly before we pressed record, and I said to you, there is a time and place in the world for our work to be revealed through the characters and through the stories, but bringing in all of the real truth, actual events that people may have heard about, they may have experienced, but they weren't sure what actually happened because they were getting snippets.
Yeah.
So, what made you want to tell the story through your characters?
Well, I mean, it's more or less what you've just said. I mean, I was very fortunate. I left Derry very young, and I went to London, and I worked very hard. And as a result of that, I worked for big companies like American Express. I traveled all over the world, and as you say, people would continually ask me, what were the troubles? Why did they start? And quite innocently, why did they start? And certainly why they lasted so long. So I had this wacky idea of coming home when I did return back to Ireland. And I just thought, I think it's important that people understand because the truth is, a lot of the media, as we all know, and we could talk about this forever, stories were being told from each sort of aspect. So really, we never got to the truth. So from my own experiences, having grown up in a very Republican area, I wanted to tell my story from my side, but also importantly, I talk about a young British soldier and the aspect of what it was like for him coming along and a young Protestant. So I've tried really, really hard to be as fair across the board. And Sharon, we all know in life you're never going to please everybody because, as you say, these are very hard-hitting stories. There is no filter because war, as I call it, doesn't have a filter.
No. And you're so true. And even when you said the word war, I got shivers up through my legs and body because that's exactly what it was for the people in Northern Ireland. And I know we lived in the south of Ireland, as everyone across the UK and the world would say. But for me, we got snippets of it as children, and it seemed to be like a land far away, that it wasn't part of our country. And that's what made me, I suppose, even just seeing your stories and your books is like how removed we were in the South from it.
Yeah, I mean you're absolutely right, and I've been very fortunate because the books have sold particularly well in the South, and time again I get lots of people saying, "Oh my goodness, we didn't realize it was so bad," but it was horrible. It was a horrific time to grow up. I mean, even most so in the cities, of course, you've got Belfast and you've got Derry, where a lot of the real sort of riots. But of course, I mean, again, you can just look at it affected everybody in one way or the other. And it just really depended, I guess, on postcode and where you lived. But ultimately, it was a very, very turmoilic, is that is, time,
Yeah.
especially in the early 70s as well, and right through. So yeah, I have had that feedback, and people have been almost glad to have read because I that was part of the reason I wrote. I wanted to write it through a fictional tale because there's been, as you know, so many fantastic books written, by politicians or not. Well, you can cut that bit out,
Yes.
Sharon. By great journalists. But it's not everybody's cup of tea. And timing, as you say, was important. So that's why I wrote the fictional story around the survival of a shirt factory, which you may not know, Sharon. At one time, like 80% of the women in the city were actually employed by shirt factories here in Derry, where people just more shirts anywhere in the world. So there's a real historical element to it as well. But no,
Yeah.
it's gone down very, very well in the South.
Wow, that's amazing. And again, even talking about it, and I know the book starts off kind of revolving around the character of Caitlin McLaughlin.
McLaughlin, yeah.
And is she based on you, people you know? Where did you come up with her character? I
There's
always
a lot of
love that.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a good question, and inevitably, a lot of people, they write about what they know, and there's a lot of me and Caitlin. Caitlin's a dreamer, and I still am a dreamer. But I grew up. It wasn't easy growing up at that stage, and yes, there is a lot, and I did fall in love very young as well, but we won't go there.
I
But
love that.
yes, there was a lot of the good, bad, and the ugly. That's how I would describe it. But yeah, and then of course there's other characters. There's some pretty horrible characters in there, but there were. And then there's one particular, there's the uncle Tommy who I just adore. He's don't tell my uncle, but it's based on him. Don't think I've ever told anyone that actually, but he was one of those fixers that we all have in the family, and he was a great fixer, always there when you needed him.
Oh, that is so lovely, isn't it? Yeah, because I've had a lot of authors on the podcast, and I'm always intrigued, as I said, when people write fiction, because I wrote nonfiction, obviously real true story stuff. But I love that it's like how you intertwine yourself, your personality, the people around you. But more importantly, in your books, it is the story of what was really going on. It's not just an imagined place somewhere in the world that you've never experienced. This is something that really affected your life.
Yeah.
So when do you remember going back, even as a child, when do you remember, Jane, you know, noticing or really being affected by everything that was going on in the Troubles?
Well, it's almost a bit of a double-edged sword because we didn't know. I mean, I was born in 66, so really 69 onwards, all through my life, all through my younger life, you didn't think twice about going through security checkpoints, for example. I mean, we've got 7 gates in the city here, in the walled city, and every gate had a checkpoint. Every shop you were checked, your bags were searched. And then, like I was talking to someone the other day, and I was saying I was in London actually on the 7th of July, and my husband and I was sitting in a cafe just off Liverpool Street, and I heard the bomb go off in Aldgate Street, and I said to John, "That's a bomb." And he's like, "Yeah, right." I said, "John, I'm telling you now, that's a bomb." So we didn't know any different, but I think one of the things I've found really sad is that having done a lot of research in the book, just reading some of the books like I read on reporting the Troubles. I read Say Nothing. I'm Peter Taylor, the BBC correspondent, Operation Chiffon. I did a lot of reading for research. I did a lot of reading about the hunger strikes and, how things perhaps could have been avoided. And that's one of the things that's made me incredibly sad. This could have been solved much easier, but unfortunately, I mean, I think it's fantastic that we got to where we got. I don't know how it was ever signed in 98 because it was based very much on the Sunningdale, the Sunningdale Agreement, which was in the early 70s. So that was used as this sort of the strawman document. So, and yes, of course, things have got a trillion times better, but we still have that. The divide is still there. It still is there. And God willing, it'll through time and talk, it'll slowly, we hope, disappear.
Yeah. And it's amazing because, again, when you look back to 1998 and everyone's celebrating the Good Friday Agreement, and we're now in 2025, but that people are still very aware of the divide,
Yeah.
south, north, even in Northern Ireland itself, the divide is very there because you can't just change things because there was an agreement signed, that
No.
there is history there, as you said, it's like not forgetting what has happened, not forgetting the people that were affected by this, the people that were killed in the conflicts,
Yeah.
in the war,
Yeah.
And it's even to my mind, it's so strange to think of you living daily. going through checkpoints. I remember going to the north years ago. Do you remember when from the south they'd go up to
Yeah,
the north for the
yeah.
Christmas shopping, a busload
Oh
of them?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I remember quite young with my mother on this exciting trip, and we were terrified when we were met with soldiers in Enniskillen and they boarded the bus. I was
Mm,
sure we were
mm.
going to be taken prisoner. I couldn't
I
understand
know,
this.
I know. I mean, this is the whole thing, and even to this day, I hate going through security at airports. I'm being warned by John, my husband, to saying, "Don't say anything," because it does do something to me. I can't explain it. And having been away for over 30 odd years, you know, coming back, it's still there. There's something inherent in your DNA that you never forget. And
Mhm.
again, I think about, and one of the storylines is about a young girl who, she loves her stilettos. I mean, she has them under every color of the rainbow and sadly she gets injured, and it talks about the effects. So it's not just the people that were killed, which is dreadful, but there was thousands that were actually to this day still suffer from the injuries that they got through the troubles. So that again is something I don't want people to forget. And seriously, Sean, you're right about the timing. I think with we've now got Trespasses, a new TV series with by oh my goodness, I've forgotten her name. It's gone. I read the book. Um, oh,
It could come back to you.
yeah, it'll come back to me. Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of TV series now with blue lights and things. The police, and I still call them the RUC. Forgive me, but
Yeah.
sort of bringing a human touch, a human element to it. Because when I first wrote these books, probably the first book was probably what, 4 years ago, 3, 4 years ago. I had a big flat no. Nobody wanted to touch these books. And still in some areas they still don't. Publishers, agents, they don't want to, it doesn't sell. Romance, as you know, at the moment is the big seller. Everybody wants to romance, which I get because it can take you off to a safer, warmer, marshmallowy world. Whereas who wants to read about the troubles? But I wrote them, to get to as a legacy for my grandkids in New Zealand as well, for them to understand what my life was like and to know their history, to know their Irish history as well. So that's really important to me.
I think that is so beautiful because many stories go with the people that experience them. And I've often said that, I love when people do. My sister was doing something in Wicklow last night, stories around the fireside and bringing people together and to talk about the stories they remember from the past because when those people are gone,
I
those
know.
stories are gone. So I think it's amazing and so courageous of you to write what you know but through these fictional characters in your book. What a lovely legacy to leave your
Oh,
grandchildren.
absolutely. And it probably explains a lot of my madness as well.
Yes,
Very mad.
I love it. So, were you always interested in writing, Jane, or where did that love of writing come from?
I think, I mean, I guess, I left school at 16. We just had to go to work and, I didn't get the opportunity to go to university, which one day I will do. One day I'll get the chance to throw whatever it's called up in the air. But I've always been a reader. I mean, seriously, for as long as I can remember. And I love all sorts of genre. I mean, I love the classics, the Jane Austen, but I mean, I love Stephen King,
Yeah.
you name it, Dracula. You name it, I read anything I could get. I mean, my local library at that time, it was a porter cabin. It hadn't even been built. It was a whole new sort of big estate that was being built. But I disappeared and into books, and I still do. As you know yourself, Sharon, if you write, you've got to read. You just cannot just whatever. So when I think about the first time, and I've told this story, forgive me, many times, when I came down, it was one New Year's Day, and I came down the stairs. John and I were up in Malin before we were moving back to the UK or to Ireland. I said, I'm going to write a book. I mean, he nearly wet himself laughing. He just sort of, yeah, right, whatever, So out of that, a monster was born. But when I think about the first draft, the story was there. And when I sent it to an editor, she said, okay, the grammar, the punctuation, but you're a storyteller. And that's what is precisely what you said, and I always tend to think, I just sort of think hundreds of years ago or whatever, that's how people told stories, and each Chinese mistress, it was changed as time went by. I loved all the Catherine Cookson series, right? She was in her early 50s when she started to write, okay? She started to write because she'd lost quite a few babies, I understand. She needed something to focus on. And I thought, well, didn't go to university, but she had a good editor. And if you can tell the story and it's here, all the tools are around you to make it happen. It really, really does. But you've got to have that want, and you've got to, I suppose, have that imagination. And I believe me, I've got quite an imagination.
I
Needless to
love that.
say.
I think it's that child in all of us, isn't
Oh
it?
yeah,
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 and I think that's wonderful. And you can kind of get that from your energy as well. There is a playfulness in you,
yeah,
even in the seriousness of the story,
yeah,
and in your books. But it is that playfulness and that storytelling. And I love that, like the Chinese whispers, people sitting around, and by the time it gets to the end of the tale,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
three arms and a leg added onto the story as well.
No,
But
you're right.
just, and I think even though through your book, say in the first one, Turmoil, and everything revolving around Caitlin McLaughlin, I think we need, especially when we're talking about something that people want to avoid, it's that when we get to know that character and the characters that she comes into contact with, we want to find out what happens. So that gets gripped. But again, it's the real truths and stories of what's going on in the area at the time that it's opening up our awareness as well, which a lot of people, as I said, including myself, were not fully aware of. So for me, that's what I love a story,
Yeah,
and even if it was really, if it was about you, Jane, it was exactly Jane Buckley, and this is where you live, I'd still be interested because it's your story and it's told from your perspective. But I
yeah.
think you're right. It's bringing this, because it's a tale of conflict, sacrifice, and forbidden love. I mean, who
Yeah.
wouldn't want to read that?
No, and truly, it is a really difficult. It's a love not just from class, but religion and, perception, and so many mixed marriages were not encouraged at that time by any means. And we hear so many sad stories where couples have had to get up and leave. They've actually left the country because it wasn't accepted. So thank goodness, that mindset has changed. But it was a forbidden love. And, as people read through the four books, and, again, Sharon, they're big books, they're not quick books to read. I've got the new one here of Darkness. I was going through it this morning, because I've done new covers for them. And depending on the typeface, a normal typeface is probably about 500 pages, but you can't, for that type of period of time, if you really want to grasp and understand and taste what it was like, you can't just spit it out. It has to be told properly. And again, I'm going against all the rules of commercial publishing, and that it's not an easy, it's by not any means, it's not an easy read. There's a few scenes in there that are tough, really, really tough. But again, and we will use the word war is ruthless and war is cruel, and there are obviously there's casualties of war from all perspectives, from all sides.
Yeah. Yeah, because I see that it's deeply disturbing and yet engaging.
Yeah,
It's other people, it sucked me in and held me tight and left me wanting
yeah,
more.
yeah.
That is amazing. So when you started that first book, Turmoil, did you have an idea that it would be a series, or were you just writing and seeing where it went?
I hadn't a clue. I hadn't a clue. And again, I've learned so much. I mean, believe me, I've learned so much. There's so many writers, they have all these plots all laid out. I just started to write, and through the research, I mean, I have to say, through research, I was able to pick up on dates and specific events and, things that I dug deep in terms of research. So there's a few stories in there. One, for example, is when a Curry's lorry is hijacked, and that's based on a true event. And it's almost black humor because it's quite comical. I won't say any more what happened, but it is true. So these little nitbits of stories, through newspapers, through YouTube, and I did a lot of research for the British soldier, and you could not like this guy. This guy was a guy, just a normal lad from Newcastle joined the army, like many young men did, because there was no work on the Tyne anymore. And he finds himself in the UK and he's thinking, why am I hated so much? So you've got that element of, he's homesick, he's cold, it's raining all the time. So I've really tried to embrace his story as well as the Republican and the nationalists and the unionists and there's I think I must have done something really bad in a previous life because there's some pretty horrible scenes in there. I mean, don't upset me. I think that's
Yeah. And again, maybe it is looking at, as you said, the reality of those times and not to sugarcoat it.
it's not
Again,
sugar-coated.
yeah, and I think that's what stands out for me because even as we see now in our world, we are seeing, whereas we didn't have mobile phones and
Yeah,
video as such, we just saw what the media fed us.
yeah,
And there was
yeah,
snippets of, as I said, especially down here.
yeah.
But now we're seeing exactly what's going on, and
Yeah.
nothing is sugar-coated,
Oh,
because we're getting the real videos from
yeah.
the real
Which,
people.
which is, again, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes I don't know about you, but I have to almost step away because I'm
Yeah.
getting, and I don't think our brains are functioned to get so much information. And we're all starting to think, well, what is true, what isn't true. So that's something that really, really does concern me as well.
Mm.
So things have changed so much, even in the last 10 years with everything. So yeah, but I mean I was gonna say I've loved every minute of it. Oh, I mean, it's I really, and funny, I'm going to meet a ladies group from Creggan here in Derry just after I finish with you. And the whole purpose of going there is to say, if you've got a story, just write it down. It doesn't just get it out of your system, keep that story, and there's so much talent about. I mean, it's just surreal.
Mm. Well, I love that you just said to your husband, John, I'm going to write a book,
Yeah.
and he laughed.
Yeah.
But you started and it just flowed from you. Now, you had to do all of the research, but again, you had lived the experience. Did you find it that it was bringing you back to your childhood, to those days you were growing up? Did you find it cathartic? Did it bring up anything else for you, Jane? How did you feel?
I mean, I have to say, and again, it goes back to we didn't know any different. So I think the one thing that I probably found incredibly sad was I didn't understand why there were soldiers here. I didn't understand, I mean, for example, I had a friend of mine who lost her brother. He was involved and, he got killed. And I don't think we knew how to react per se. It was just one of those things. So um, I I think I enjoyed the writing aspect of it, the content and the emotion. I mean, there's one or two scenes in there. I'm thinking about it hard now. There's one scene there that more personal to me is when, so I'm not going to say who, but there's a funeral scene and I was actually crying when I typed it because there was a lot of my own experience in that. And, again, there's another scene with the Hyde Park bombings with the horses, and that's really sad as well. So yeah, there are scenes in there but I think you've almost become a little bit word blind in the end because I've seen these so many times. I never want to see them again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it now. So yeah, yeah. But I think that's what writing does. That's what storytelling does. It brings out emotions in you. It brings out either your own emotions or, and again, this is the thing I feel really, and I love doing, Sharon, as you can imagine, I'm not shy. I love reading my stories because, I can put the feeling into them. And I think it's really important for any author that when they do read their stories, they tell the stories. They're not reading, they're storytelling, if that makes any sense
Yes.
at all.
Absolutely, it does. Yes. So when you finished Turmoil and you had a sigh of relief that you had written this and it was, deeply disturbing but yet engaging, did you have the idea for the second book?
Yeah, well, the story leads on because
Yeah.
it continues as to what happens next.
Yes.
I mean, darkness is dark. I mean, turmoil is pretty dark, but darkness, I mean, that's like based in 1975. But the thing that I find emotionally really gripping in that is it's based, a lot of it is based around the Armagh Women's Prison. So, there's not many stories per se about, how you had you had granny's daughters and, daughters, granny and grand, three generations almost of women in jail at the same time. And
Wow.
I mean, and how these women coped, through internment. Basically, if, for example, two girls were wearing what you would have called the old, like the old black parka jackets, and they were sent to Armagh by a judge who said they looked like they were wearing military clothing and things like that. So all those little things that I do think people have never heard of or have been forgotten, I've resurrected again, through the storyline. So I mean, the brave, the women, the way that they kept each other going, it was just under terrible conditions, not, really awful conditions. I felt I had to tell that story. So that's where, darkness came into. And then by the time I came to the third book, Light, I thought I better start trying to cheer the reader up a bit here because this is getting a wee bit depressing. So we've got again a number of true events in there, but the political platform is changing. You need the ballot rather than it was really when the provisionals, when the provost decided to think, let's start talking, let's start making change here with Sinn Féin and everything. So you've got that political side of it, and again you've got the other side as well from the unionist perspective. We were very anti it, so but I have to say, trying to get that balance right in Light was pretty tough. And then Hope, of course, we've still got Caitlin and what's happening to
Yes.
Caitlin, but leading into and up to the Good Friday Agreement, and the final sort of scene is really you bring everybody together and we're all at the Guildhall Square and the deal's been done. But again, I'm not writing these books to please. You're never going to please everybody, but I'm proud of them.
Oh, well done. And I love that you say that because, again, as I said, even from the titles like Turmoil, Darkness, Light, and Hope, that is exactly what a conflict is, isn't it?
Mhm.
That you are experiencing the turmoil in the darkness, but that we all need a little bit of light and hope in our lives. And there are, even though we only see the conflict, but there are ordinary people, as you said, living extraordinary lives behind that. And even those untold stories about the women in Armagh jail, that you highlighted that. I just think that is so powerful because I think a lot of the time women were kind of pushed to the side as well, weren't they, years ago?
Oh,
And that you're, even through Caitlin being the main character, that these stories are revolving around which women held families together, held
oh,
communities together.
I mean, and most definitely, and and then I've also talked from the prisoner's perspective, because if you think about it, a guy who goes into prison in 1972 gets out 20 years later. The world's very different, but his wife's still there. The kids have all grown up, and a lot of the prisoners, I mean, divorce was rife after that, So women found their voices, dare I say this, because they had to be the head of the family and to keep the family together while supporting their husbands. So, but the whole society, the whole mindset changed. So women did for the first time, they lost that sense of being stuck in the kitchen. They discovered themselves, I guess, is right, because they had to, and some, they went on to do some amazing things, with the peace, the women's peace movement and things like that, which I've also covered in there, and you know, um, just the support that they gave to the community was just surreal.
I think you're remarkable because I really do. Because, as you said, it's not an easy topic. Not everybody wants to remember it and they don't want to remember the details, because again, it can be hard. But I think when you are bringing such light and hope into it with the characters also and showing that there was love and that there was community and there was support, that kind of for me balances out as well. And you are looking from both sides, which we have to do in all
Oh,
conflict as
totally,
well.
absolutely. I mean, there's, again, there's good and there's bad on all sides. That goes without saying. And and if you were to look at the reviews, there's some people that are still very angry, So and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. But the one thing I have to say, there's still that humor in there. I mean, there's a couple of stories in there that are true stories, which I won't spoil them for you, but I mean actual true events that happened in there. And humor was like any, we all find black, we always have to find something to laugh about to make us human and survive. So there is that, it's threaded through the books as well. Some very funny stories, which I've had great feedback on as well.
Oh, that's good.
People that I knew as well, people that I knew. So, I'm allowed to write about it because I knew these people and I knew what they were all about.
Yeah. And I think just as you said, because you can kind of see that no more than the imagination and the storytelling, you can see that lightheartedness, humorous
Yeah.
lady that you are as well.
Uh-huh.
As you said, that helps us get through many a tough time.
You have to. I mean, I've got this sort of thing. You either go left and leave it be or right and react. So I try really hard not to react. Doesn't work all the time, but I try to let it go and move on and, get on with it.
Yeah. So having written four books, how do you feel about that series now? If you look back in 10 years' time and you think, I started writing that book and my husband laughed at me saying, "Art, what are you talking about?" And then I went to write a whole series telling the life of Caitlin, but not only that, the life that was lived for many people during those troubles.
I don't know how to answer that, I really don't because um as I said, I've worked so hard and I'm a real perfectionist. And and I've learned, believe me, as I said before, I've learned the hard way. I've made mistakes in terms of, producing the books and getting I don't know. I mean, I think I think the one thing is I'd look forward to my grandkids reading them and saying, "Wow, Granny, well done you." I understand now because they're in New Zealand. They've got the Kiwi accent. I don't want them to lose that
Yeah.
Irish heritage. And I think maybe in 10 years I'll grow to love the books. But it's down to getting the comma in the right place and getting the grammar and just making it as good as I can possibly get. But I mean, and I think we're probably going to lead on to this, but I've already started the next book, which is, I mean, this is where dreams do come true. I mean,
Yes.
truly.
Tell
Oh,
everyone
this
about this now,
this is
Project
unbelievable.
Children, because this is
Yeah.
amazing as well.
Yeah. I mean, Project Children started in 1974, but it was the concept began in 1974 in New York, but was by two brothers, two New York cops, Pat and Dennis Mulcahy. And Pat and his wife were booking a ticket back to Ireland, and they were in the estate with the travel agent, and they saw a little, like one of those, collecting for the poor people or the
Yeah.
baby. And it was for children of Ireland or whatever. And they said, well, what's that about? And they said, well, we're just collecting money to, to send home for, per children or whatever. And Pat and his wife on the way home in the car, they came up with an idea and they went back to Greenwood Lake, which is, north of New York. And they said to Dennis and the brother and the family, why don't we bring some kids, get them out of Belfast or Derry, bring them over here for a 6-week holiday, Catholic and Protestant, so that they can get away, get a wee taste of what life could be like, and just give them a break, give the parents a break, blah, blah, blah. So they started off in 1975 with 6 kids, 76, 21 kids. And over the 30 years, they ended up with 23,000 children. Okay,
Wow.
6,000 host families. Now, these kids were from all different backgrounds, but you can imagine, and some of the interviews I'm doing here are just absolutely hilarious. At one time they had 3747, so you can imagine 300 kids on a plane. Some of them had never been on a train, no matter a
Mhm.
plane. So it's just a powerful, powerful story. But I had written the storyline into one of the characters in my books because I was never chosen
Oh.
as a child, and I was raging.
Oh.
So so I contacted Project Children and just said, heads up, I've written these books, blah, blah, blah. The storyline's in there. And lo and behold, Dennis Mulcahy's daughter, Maureen, happened to be in Letterkenny just down the road from me and said, well, let's meet up. So we met, and you can imagine we talked forever and ever. And then within a matter of months, I was asked if I'd like to go and visit Greenwood Lake, which is like something out of the Waltons, picket fence lake. You can just imagine gorgeous, white cladded houses, blah, 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 to see if Dennis Mulcahy and I got on well, to see whether I would, quite frankly, whether he liked me. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, he did. So I've been commissioned to write the Project Children's Story, which is supporting the documentary How to Defuse a Bomb, narrated by Liam Neeson and made by Cat by a local studio here in Derry. So, and the book's due to be published next August. It'll be launched in Greenwood Lake. So that's my next thing. But I got to Greenwood Lake and I've been there 3 or 4 times. So my dream did come true. I got to see the Waltons literally and visit Greenwood Lake. So, and it's been just I mean, I've never met such kind and amazing, the hostess, the host families have just been unbelievable. But you can imagine, which I think is one of the things I want to tell again in the storyline, is how brave it was of the mums and dads to actually entrust their kids, across the Atlantic for 6 weeks to families that they may know just by letters or photographs. You couldn't do it now.
No.
You just couldn't. But it
It
shows
is.
you how desperate they were, how much they wanted their children to experience normality.
Yeah, it is just powerful. That's again, I had never heard of that. Imagine. And I was like, how have we not heard of these
Yeah,
amazing
I know.
stories?
I
That's what
mean,
I mean. There are so many stories behind the scene, behind the conflicts that people have never heard about, and you're going to write about it. But even for those 23,000 children, from both sides, they get to experience 6 weeks without, conflict or turmoil or darkness in
yeah,
their
yeah,
lives. It is light and hope for
yeah.
them. But even, mixing with the other side, being on the same plane and seeing these are just normal children from,
Oh, but I mean, the thing is, and again, this is really important, is trying to understand that the background was Catholic kids and Protestant kids did not mix. And still I mean, I think something like 97% of the schools in the north here are still segregated schools. It's probably only through sports and just through time that these kids are mixing. And again, you'd have streets in Belfast where there was a road dividing. You just didn't cross that street. You just didn't. So the fact that, and again, using the humor element, there's in book 3, you got these two kids. One's Catholic, one's Protestant. What are you? A Jaffa? What do you mean? So there's like the banter that goes on. I thought they had horns. I mean, this was true. This is true. I mean, but fortunately, you asked me earlier about impinging onto my life. I did a lot of swimming competitively. So, I did a lot of training and stuff. So it didn't really affect me. Only then when we went to galas, for example, if we were to go to a place in like Ballymena, you had all the Union Jacks down one side and then all the tricolours down the other side. And you never talked. You
oh
just could
no.
not be speaking. So people need to understand
Mm.
that that's just how divided it was. You just couldn't be seen to mix or talk. I mean, I was actually asked to leave the swimming club because I made a friend that was Protestant.
Oh my goodness.
So taking these kids away, putting them into a neutral environment, deliberately putting them next to each other, and then they end up being best man at each other's weddings, and then some people went back to Harvard, and some people married the siblings from one of the families, and they went back again and again and again, and the next generations they all know each other. So there's been friendships made and relationships made that it's just dreamlike. It's a fantastic story, and I feel really, really proud that I've been asked to do it.
Oh, well, I'm not surprised that you've been asked. But even just that thinking, just as you said, you see another child back that time and you were told not to talk to them and you're looking at them going, they're just, a child, but I cannot speak to them. But when you do sit on a plane or you go to the States and you meet with them and you become best friends, that must have had an impact on them then coming back, growing into adolescence and going into adulthood to change things for the better.
Yeah. I mean, it undoubtedly it did, but again, I mean, some of these kids were as young as 9. Like, think about it, 9 years of age going to America for 6 weeks because, they went up probably from about 9 to 14 or 15. And yeah, a lot of them did keep in touch, but a lot of them didn't when they got back because you still had, and you'll always have that mindset where, nah, it can't, there wasn't an occasion for it to happen. Although, Project Children did start in St. Column's house here just in Derry. They started a football team. So, they were able to bring, and again, we know that sport can
Mm.
bring so many together. So there was follow-up after it. But it was just from the interviews I've done, I'm talking to these 50, 60-year-old kids. I laugh kids, I'm the same age.
Yeah.
And you can see that they become the children again when they're telling, I'll never forget when I got the first ice cream. It was, oh, it was that big, so the excitement, it is life changing. Whether even if it's given an element, a snippet of change, that can only be good.
Absolutely. And I think for many people, even that message in the world today is giving children an opportunity out of circumstances that are beyond their control, that where there is conflict and turmoil, just to show them that life can be different, that, there is hope out there for them. And I
Yeah.
think sharing that story again is absolutely necessary and so important and vital nowadays. So I think it's an amazing project.
Well, just if I could add, they actually have got some of the archive at the Monaghan Peace Campus telling the project story. So if anybody is in and around Monaghan, it's well worth a visit. And you can see some of the artifacts and like the little notebooks. I mean, think about it. In '75, there was no computers. Everything was done on a manual typewriter, notebook after notebook, and everybody had their little label with their numbers. So it's going to be a joy. It is actually a joy to write. It truly is.
I think this is more fun maybe than writing all the disturbing things that you've been writing. It's going to give you this joyful, playful aspect, but still the storytelling of it as well. And but again, if you hadn't written
Yeah.
your first 4 books, this opportunity wouldn't have been presented to you. Isn't that amazing, Jane?
No, no, it's great. And, again, I've always been a bit of a risk taker anyway. I love change. But it's true, you never say never. It doesn't matter what age you are. And this is why, yeah, I just want to, if I do truly believe if I can do it, seriously, anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Everyone's different, I know, but never say never. Just do it. I mean that.
Yeah. And I think it's giving ourselves the opportunity to explore another aspect of ourselves that maybe
Exactly.
we didn't get to experience, again through, circumstances,
Yeah.
situation, young children, whatever it was. And that now, especially as women,
Yeah.
that those doors are opening up. But I think we need to step through them, Jane, and
Yeah.
we need to experience our own voices and let other people hear the stories that we have to share. And that's one of the reasons I love the podcast, because I get to meet amazing people like you and hear about all of your life and work and the projects you're working on. And again, for me, it's like if we don't open up our world and our awareness, if we don't, there is 2 sides to everything. And I think it's to look at it from a balanced perspective, as you're doing in your books, that sometimes we get stuck in the old patterns and cycles and nothing changes. And again, I think that's what you're doing is you're looking at it from both perspectives in your books, and here bringing this again out of all of that turmoil and conflict, you're bringing out the story of Project Children,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is just
yeah.
amazing. And even for those police officers to start that initiative back in 1975. That is so powerful.
I mean, it just couldn't be done today. It just
No,
couldn't. I mean, you can
no,
imagine trying to do it today. And sadly, it sort of ended around 2015 because kids had mobile phones and they wanted to phone home. But then that's okay. But, things have there's a natural lifespan, I think, for certain things. And, but they
yeah,
did, they still doing internships. They do the Mulcahy Scholarship and things where they bring kids from America over to Galway University. So it's not over yet. There's still everything, it sort of evolves to
mm,
suit what's needed. And it's just brilliant.
yeah. Well, you're just brilliant.
Oh,
You really are. You are. You're just so easy to talk to.
oh,
And
I've
it's
got, listen,
like,
I am take it or leave it, Sharon. This is me, and I do enjoy ruffling feathers, I mean, life's,
yeah,
you've got to ruffle a few feathers here and then, and
yeah,
it's, I think there's just it is what it is, just do your best and that's it.
yeah. But also live your life,
Mm, mm,
with the freedom that you have now.
mm.
Because again, if you look back to young Jane and going through security checks and getting
Yeah.
her bag checked and not being able to speak to someone across the street of the same age or play with them, and you see yourself now and the freedom and writing and the freedom expressing yourself and saying what you want, what do you think young Jane would say?
Jeepers, I don't know. I don't even think I thought that far ahead, to be honest.
No.
I just think we just got on with it, and um, I did my swimming and stuff, but I don't think I think I just kept reading. I just read and read and read. And and that's really where the imagination came from, So, and again, can you imagine a world without imagination? That's one of the things I'm talking to in schools. I was at a local school a while back and I was saying about, just imagine there was, just I don't know, just imagine there's no such thing as books. There's no reading, there's no writing. What would the world be like? And one of the other wacky ideas I have is I'm a great letter writer. I love writing letters. So I've got all the letters that I've written to my kids, wherever I was, or I'm always sending cards and things. So I'm actually coming up with this idea of just getting some of the schools, maybe in Belfast, to write to some of the kids in Derry by pen, becoming pen pals.
Yeah.
And just, I love getting letters. I don't know about you. I don't like getting
Mm.
the ones that you don't want, but there's nothing lovelier than a handwritten letter with,
Mm.
cursive writing. And, I just thought, well, get these kids because everyone's doing this now. We're losing the art.
Mm.
If you remember, you're probably too young, Sharon. You,
Ah,
you remember doing the old cursive writing, your F at F, 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 on the lines in the textbooks and things. So that's one of the things I've got at the back of my mind is to encourage kids to write letters and to schools across the divide as well, so that through the schools they can write a letter, send it to the school, obviously for safety. The letters are scanned, but a great way of just breaking down the barriers as well.
oh, I think that is amazing. And I hear my mother when I say this
Excuse
because
me.
it's all right. She said there was nothing more beautiful than getting a letter years ago
Hmm. Hmm.
when people went to America.
Exactly.
But years and years after those people have left this world, and you take that letter out of a box,
Goosebumps.
absolutely, you see that beautiful handwriting, the date on it, and
Mm.
what their life was like.
Mm.
And the sadness sometimes in those letters, but also a little bit of joy. And that itself is a story. And again, from our imagination, if you had never been across the oceans, you're imagining what their life, they're trying to explain it and describe it to you and their work and their lives. And the people that never got to
Yeah.
travel to America or
Yeah.
Australia or whatever think it's this far off land and just to get that letter every whatever few months was so important. And one of the things we have to stop doing is writing. It's emails and texts and everything
Yeah.
else now.
Yeah.
So I think getting young people to write letters, but what would be an amazing thing is if their grandparents are still with us or their parents, is to get them to write letters to
That's a
their
wonderful idea.
children.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because I still got all the letters that my mum sent me when I
Yeah.
was first in London, because make sure you clean your teeth, all
Yeah.
the things. So
Yeah.
I've still got them in the attic. In fact, I came across them not that long ago. But no, that's a lovely idea. But again, I just saying to my husband John, I was thinking it goes, Jane, just write the Project Children book first. Just one thing at a time. I'm sure he's ready to divorce me. But don't tell him. But no, I'm on an amazing journey. And I hate that cliche, but I mean it's true. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I've just got a feeling, I've just got an instinct that I just have to do it.
Yeah. I think you're opening up the stories hidden within others.
I hope so.
I think you really are. And even like that, those letters. the stories from the older generation, that their stories that will not be left untold if they wrote it to their grandchildren in a letter and that it's kept. I think it would be a brilliant project for another book for you, but also for a museum.
Yeah, yeah,
There's so many things with those
yeah.
stories, and I think by you starting, when you started your first book, I think you started something that is going to have a legacy that you leave behind you, not just for your grandchildren, but for many other people as
Oh,
well,
wow.
Jane.
Well, I will take the compliment and thank you very, very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Jane, it has been a pleasure, and you are just amazing. You have a lovely energy. It's bubbly, playful, but behind it is that passion to share stories and
That,
truths. And I think that is an amazing gift to have. So I wish you every success with Project Children and coming out next year and with your Stones Corner series, Turmoil, Darkness, Light and Hope, which I will be putting the links up to. And if anybody wants to contact Jane, you can contact her through janebuckleyWrites.com, and you're on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn if they want to get to know you a little bit better.
perfect.
Jane, I can't wait to see your life and your story unfolding even more. And I think your grandchildren are going to be very proud of their
Oh,
famous
don't you'll make me
granny.
you'll make me
I think they're going to be very proud of their famous granny. And
oh
what you're doing also for them is showing them that everything is possible.
absolutely. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Sharon. Thank you.
So welcome. Thank you so much, Jane. So thank you to all our listeners. You've been listening to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast with Jane Buckley. And until next time, take care of you.